The early September sun hung low over Napa Valley, painting the vineyard in slow golden strokes. Rows of deep violet grapes shimmered as Claire Halloway strode between them, clipboard in hand, boots crusted with dust, and mind locked in precision mode. Harvest was early this year. The Syrah had ripened fast, and there was no room for error. Not with the reserve label scheduled for bottling by October. Pull rows 18 to 23 by noon, she told a field manager. Tell Raoul I want acidity tested before the second batch goes in. On it, boss, he said, jogging off. Claire exhaled and adjusted her sunglasses. She scanned the rolling hills, a ritual of ownership. This was her empire. 12 years of risk, grit, and solitude, made manifest in every vine. And she'd built it all without a single dollar from her family. Then came the knock. 3 sharp raps, not at her door, but on the massive wrought iron gate that separated Halloway Estates from the dusty vineyard road. Claire turned. The figure beyond the gate stood still, framed by sunflare and disbelief. He was older now, broader in the shoulders, thinner in the face. His hair was darker than she remembered, probably dyed, but his posture had that same arrogant ease, the kind you couldn't fake. Jason. Claire froze. Her body didn't react, but her mind detonated. 18 years. The man who had once been her brother, who had vanished after liquidating their parents' land behind her back, who had left her to handle the fallout while he disappeared into silence, was now standing at her gate, wearing a smug half-smile and a pressed linen shirt like this was some casual reunion. She walked slowly toward him, boots crunching gravel. She didn't buzz the gate open. Not yet. Did you take a wrong turn? She asked, arms crossed. Jason's smile widened. Claire. She waited. He cleared his throat. I heard about Uncle Elijah. I figured, maybe it was time. To talk. Claire narrowed her eyes. Took a death in the family to grow a conscience? I'm not here to fight. Then why are you here? Jason leaned forward slightly, resting his hands on the iron bars like some well-meaning visitor, not the human landmine he was. I thought you might want to put the past behind us. Start over. Elijah wanted that too. You know how he was about family. Claire's face didn't move. You're 18 years too late for nostalgia. Jason gave a small shrug, as if that wound hadn't landed. I figured you might want to talk before the lawyers start making this complicated. There it was. The real reason. Claire's spine straightened. I take it you haven't read Elijah's most recent will, she said coolly. Jason's smile faltered just a breath. I read the one I got in the mail last month. Claire arched a brow. Then you're behind. His eyes flickered. Meaning? She stepped closer, close enough for him to see the steel behind her calm. Meaning there's a revised version, executed 3 weeks before he passed. But you already knew that, didn't you? Otherwise, you wouldn't be standing here rehearsing forgiveness. Jason forced a laugh, but it cracked mid-chuckle. Look, I'm not trying to stir anything up. Elijah told me we'd both be taken care of. I thought maybe you and I could sort this privately. Claire studied him like a wine she didn't trust. Behind her, the hum of harvest continued. Mechanical clippers, voices shouting instructions, the clatter of crates. But inside her chest, there was a stillness, a clarity. Jason wasn't here to reconnect. He was here to collect. And he had no idea how far ahead she already was. She turned without a word, walked to the keypad and buzzed the gate open. Jason hesitated before stepping in. You're letting me in? He asked, surprised. Claire didn't look back. Curiosity isn't forgiveness. They walked in silence toward the main house, her house. The sleek, modern glass structure caught the light like a blade against the vines. Halfway up the path, Jason tried again. So, this inheritance. Claire cut him off without turning her head. Elijah left more than you think. But you're going to find out the hard way. Jason stopped walking. Claire kept going. The wind picked up, rustling the vines, carrying with it the scent of crushed grapes, and the storm of a reckoning not far behind. Claire poured 2 glasses of water, but only set one down on the polished kitchen island. Jason looked around the open concept space with the performative interest of someone trying to rewrite history with his eyes. High ceilings, brushed concrete floors, the wraparound view of endless vineyards. It was the kind of home that announced independence without ever having to say it. You really did it, he said, easing onto one of the bar stools. Built all this. Claire stayed standing. I didn't build it. I bled for it. Jason smirked, a hint too smug. Don't get poetic. You were always good at making drama sound like destiny. Claire's eyes didn't leave. And you were always good at making betrayal sound like business. His smile faltered. Silence stretched. She walked to the far counter and opened a file drawer, pulled out a folder, thick, crisp, bound with red twine, and dropped it on the island between them. The cover read, Probate, Elijah Carr. Jason didn't touch it. You've already filed, he said, blinking. Claire nodded once. 3 weeks ago. Jason leaned back, eyes narrowing slightly. That fast? I don't drag my feet when someone dies, especially not someone who trusted me. Jason looked down at the glass he hadn't touched. And what exactly did he leave you? She tilted her head. You mean, what did he not leave you? That cut landed. His jaw shifted. Just a small tick, but she saw it. Jason ran a hand down his jaw and exhaled through his nose. This doesn't have to be ugly, Claire. Elijah wanted us to rebuild something. Together, Claire scoffed. You're quoting him now? He told me that over lunch last year. In Monterey? She folded her arms. Funny. He didn't mention that lunch when he was working with Lena on the revised will. Or when he transferred the vineyard license. Or when he emailed me that letter. Jason blinked. What letter? Claire didn't answer. She let the silence say, You'll never see it. His voice dropped, low and tight. I gave up a lot too, you know. I took care of Dad when you ran off to Oregon. I handled the estate sale. I kept things moving. Claire stepped forward, her tone calm and exact. You sold the family land out from under me. Lied to the bank about my power of attorney. I found out through a realtor's cold call. You didn't keep things moving, Jason. You buried the only thing left of our parents and took off. Jason stood abruptly. It was a bad time. I was trying to… No, she snapped. You were trying to cash out. And you did. And you vanished. Don't stand in my kitchen and act like we just drifted apart. For the first time, his charm cracked wide open, and something darker bled through. I want my half, he said flatly. Claire's voice was razor clean. You're not entitled to half. His nostrils flared. That's not your decision. No, she said, stepping closer. But it was Elijah's, and you're about to find out exactly what he thought you were worth. Jason stared at her, expression unreadable, and then, too quickly, laughed. This is gonna get messy, he said, walking toward the door. I'll give you a few days to come to your senses. Don't, Claire said. Don't mistake time for negotiation. He paused at the threshold. You think you're untouchable? That vineyard makes you bulletproof. No, she replied, steady. But it gave me armor. And you're not the first thing it's deflected. Jason opened the door, but before stepping out, he turned back. You always were Dad's favorite. Guess you finally decided to act like him? Claire didn't blink. That's the last bluff you'll play in my house. He left without another word. Claire stood there for a long moment, alone with the silence, the untouched glass of water, and the folder that would soon ignite a war. From the hallway, the soft buzz of her phone vibrated on the console. She walked over and picked it up. Text from Lena. He's filed something. Not sure what yet. Want me to pull it? Claire stared out at the vineyard. Reply. Yes, pull everything. He's already making his move. By the second week of October, Claire's vineyard had become a battlefield dressed as a celebration. Harvest gala season was in full swing, an annual tradition where wine elite descended on the valley with silk scarves, sunglasses at sunset, and too much perfume. It was meant to be the reward after months of labor. But this year, Claire Halloway moved through the tasting tent with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, her senses tuned to the shift in energy around her like a general walking her line. He was here again. Jason had made a habit of appearing where he wasn't invited. At first, it was casual, showing up at the public-facing wine bar, hovering too close to guests, shaking hands like he was still a partner. Then it escalated. Tonight, he was standing near the reserve barrel display, sipping her best 2019 Syrah, as if he owned the vintage. Need me to remove him? Lena Voss asked, stepping up beside her. The lawyer wore a black silk blouse and a look that said she was 3 steps ahead of whatever Jason was plotting. Claire's lips didn't move. No, let him watch the empire he didn't build. He's been spreading rumors, Lena murmured, eyes still on him. Telling people he has legal grounds to reclaim 50% of the estate. Says Elijah left multiple wills? Claire turned to her. He filed something, didn't he? Lena nodded once. Earlier this morning, county clerk flagged it. An older will. Notarized, dated 2 years ago. Precedes the version we filed. Claire didn't flinch. Forgery? Almost certainly. But it'll take time to prove. Then buy us that time. File an injunction. Lena gave a sharp nod and disappeared into the crowd like a shadow. Claire downed the rest of her rosé and moved toward the staff entrance behind the tent. She needed air and space, but both had become scarce. That afternoon, Jason had cornered her vineyard foreman, Marco, in the employee parking lot. "You should think about who really owns this place," Jason had told him. "Might be smart to stay neutral. Especially if you've got family depending on your paycheck." Marco reported it immediately. So did two other staffers who'd received similar advice. Claire had documented every word, every incident. She wasn't naive. This wasn't just about inheritance anymore. Jason wanted the world to see her crumble. 3 nights later, at 2:17 a.m., her phone rang. "Fire, tasting room. We've already called it in," said Marco. Claire was out the door in under a minute. By the time she arrived, the fire was mostly out, contained to a small exterior shed attached to the back wall. Scorch marks blackened the stone. Smoke curled upward into the starless sky. A fire marshal was already taping off the area. "Electrical?" Claire asked. The marshal shook his head. "No signs of faulty wiring. Accelerant present. Looks intentional." Claire stared at the flame-gutted wall of her tasting room, the place where she'd once poured her first bottle to a crowd of 6 and a rented food truck. "Any cameras?" the marshal asked. Claire exhaled sharply. "There will be by tomorrow." By noon the next day, a private security firm had begun installing motion detectors, floodlights, and license plate readers. Lena drew up NDAs and reinforced staff contracts. Claire issued a formal statement: "We will not be intimidated. Holloway Estates remains fully operational and secure." But the damage had been done, not to the property, but to perception. 2 investors pulled out that week. One supplier delayed a shipment indefinitely. A wine columnist wrote a piece that included the line, "Is the Holloway legacy cracking under pressure?" Claire read the article without blinking. Then she opened her inbox. New email from Lena. Subject line, "You need to see this." Attachment, will_JC_ October 2019.pdf. Claire clicked. Her heart paused mid-beat. It was a scanned legal document, complete with an outdated header from Elijah's old attorney, long since retired. Signatures in cursive, a notary seal with a crooked ink stamp, and there, centered on the 3rd page, were the words, "To be divided equally between my niece, Claire Holloway, and my nephew, Jason Holloway." Claire stared at it. Fake, but good. Too good. Her phone buzzed again. This time, a text from Lena. "He filed this with the probate court this morning. Wants an emergency hearing." Claire closed her laptop, walked out onto the balcony, and looked out over the vineyard. The rows were quiet now. Harvest was done. The vines stripped and skeletal under a gray sky. A battlefield after the first assault. The Napa Valley Harvest Auction was held in a sprawling glass atrium framed by oak trees and overpriced Pinot Dreams. It was the kind of black tie event that smelled like aged barrels, Chanel No. 5, and a century of whispered betrayals. Claire wore a navy silk dress and no jewelry, just an antique gold pin Elijah had once given her, fastened discreetly above her heart. She hadn't wanted to attend. Lena insisted. "Visibility matters," Lena had said earlier. "If we let him control the public space, we lose more than narrative. We lose trust." So Claire showed up. Jason did too. He arrived late, of course, all effortless charm and polished shoes, as if he weren't dragging a forged will through the court system behind him. He worked the room like a politician, shaking hands, laughing just a little too loud, clinking glasses with people who didn't know better, or didn't care. Claire watched from the far end of the floor, eyes like blades. Lena joined her, holding 2 flutes of sparkling rosé. She handed one over with quiet purpose. "It's confirmed," she said. "Will's a fake. Notarized 2 years ago using a stamp from an office that shut down in 2017. Signatures were lifted from DMV forms, sloppy digital overlays. My forensic guy is filing a report." Claire didn't blink. "And motive?" Lena gave a bitter smile. "Greed and proximity." Claire took a slow sip. "Then let's make proximity a problem." She crossed the room like a woman walking into her own trial, and owning the Courtroom conversations hushed as she neared Jason. His back was to her, gesturing to a couple near the silent auction board, probably spinning some family legacy lie. Claire didn't wait. You forged it. Jason turned, caught mid-smile. Claire, always lovely to see you in public. Her voice was steady, but loud enough for nearby ears. You broke into the Mendocino house, took old paperwork, faked Elijah's will. Jason blinked. What? Elijah's neighbor saw you snooping around last month, asked about the safes, said you claimed you were securing family heirlooms. His smile twitched, just slightly. Maybe Elijah changed his mind before he died. Maybe he wanted. No, Claire cut in. You wanted. So you made a version of reality that finally favored you. The crowd around them had slowed. Nobody interrupted, but no one walked away either. Jason lifted his hands, palms open, like the martyr in a bad stage play. Why would I forge a will when I could have contested the new one in court? Claire stepped closer, voice low now, but venomous. Because you needed legitimacy before discovery. Before anyone saw the footage, Jason's mouth tightened. What footage? Lena appeared at Claire's side, calm and composed. From the Mendocino cabin's exterior cam. Elijah had it installed after the break-in last year, she said. Didn't you notice the camera under the eaves? Jason looked between them. You're bluffing. We're filing for a court-supervised will review first thing Monday, Lena said. You'll be required to submit all document, originals, chain of custody, the works. Claire let that land before she turned her back on him. Jason didn't follow. He stood there, still surrounded by whispers and half-empty flutes. A man who had finally realized the room wasn't his anymore. Outside, the wind had picked. Claire stepped onto the stone terrace, pulling in a long breath. Lights twinkled across the vineyard slopes like stars pretending to be safe. Her phone buzzed. Text from Lena. The court review date's been granted, but we have a bigger problem now. Claire stared at the message. Reply. What problem? Lena's response came in seconds. Jason just filed a restraining order. Claims you're threatening him. Claire's fingers stilled on the screen. A false restraining order, filed just in time to muddy the court's perception before the forged will hearing. She looked back at the glowing atrium. Jason still inside, probably already spinning the next lie. And Claire knew, with gut-deep certainty, that this wasn't just inheritance anymore, it was war. By Monday morning, Jason wasn't just her brother, he was the headline. Napa Power sibling feud turns sour, Holloway brother claims estate theft, wine wars, family betrayal, brewing at Holloway Estates, air cutout of uncle's fortune speaks out. The stories all followed the same, money script. Jason in front of a curated backdrop, vines blurred behind him, collar just open enough to look casually devastated, claimed he'd been erased from his family's legacy by a sister driven by profit and resentment. Claire watched one of the interviews on mute in her office, the captions marching across the screen. I just want what's fair. What Elijah always intended. This isn't about greed, it's about family. The irony was almost funny. Almost. She clicked it off and turned to Lena, who stood by the window, arms crossed, tablet in hand. They're eating it up, Lena said. Especially the local wine blogs. He gave Harvest Valley Weekly an exclusive. Of course he did, Claire muttered. They'll publish anything with a cork in the headline. But the effects were already rippling. 2 more investors backed out of the estate's expansion project that morning. One tasting room employee called out, for personal reasons. Another, a floor manager who'd worked at Holloway Estates for 6 years, asked to be transferred off public-facing duties until things calmed down. Claire understood, but it still cut deeper than she let show. He's poisoning the well, she said. Lena nodded. And painting you as the tyrant. Claire walked to the French doors that opened out to the veranda. From there, she could see the stretch of land she'd turned into something lasting, her vineyard, her legacy, now being weaponized against her. We need to go on record, Lena said. Hard evidence. Counter his narrative with facts. Show what he forged. The footage. The handwriting analysis. Court filing. Claire turned back. Not yet. Lena raised an eyebrow. Why not? Claire walked to her desk and opened the drawer. From inside, she pulled out a thin folder. Plain. Unmarked. She slid it across the desk. Lena flipped it open, scanned the content. Her brows lifted slightly. You had this? Claire nodded. 3 days ago. From a freelance journalist in Phoenix. He said he'd been following Jason's pattern with a different surname, James Halloran. Lena's eyes moved faster now. He was charged with business fraud in Arizona 4 years ago, Claire said. Fake investment fund targeting small vineyard startups. The case was sealed in exchange for restitution and a confidentiality clause. Lena looked up. You plan to use it? Quietly, Claire said. I don't want a scandal. I want leverage. Lena closed the folder slowly. And if he keeps pushing the media narrative? Claire gave a thin smile. Then I push back. With something he can't afford to let go public. They sat in silence for a moment, the kind of silence that only comes after the line has been drawn. That afternoon, Claire gave a short interview of her own to a smaller publication known more for its accuracy than drama. She brought copies of legal filings, explained the process, didn't trash Jason, didn't flinch, just facts. No fire. Let the court of public opinion choose its arsonist. The article was published the next morning. Halloway Estates CEO responds to inheritance claims with court-filed proof. The piece was balanced, measured, but it was enough to stop the bleeding, at least for now. Then came the text. Unknown number. You're making this worse for yourself. We both know Elijah never wanted it this way. Claire stared at the screen, blocked the number, then called Lena. Pull the Arizona file, she said. Have it ready. I want it on standby. No leaks, just insurance. You think he knows you have it? I think he's afraid I do, Claire replied. And fear is more valuable than proof. Later that night, Claire returned to the empty tasting room. The fire damage had been cleaned, the stone had been scrubbed, repointed, sealed. It looked like nothing ever happened, but she knew better. Just as she turned to leave, her phone buzzed again. New voicemail, unknown number, no transcript. She played it. Jason's voice, low, deliberate, mocking. You think you've buried the past, but I still know where the bodies are, Claire. And I'm just getting started. Claire stared at her darkened reflection in the tasting room glass long after the voicemail ended. I still know where the bodies are. The words replayed like smoke curling under a locked door. Menacing, invasive, hard to contain. She deleted the message but didn't delete the rage. By morning, Lena was already in her office, pacing with the kind of controlled urgency Claire had come to recognize as a warning sign. We have a leak, she said. Claire didn't react, just closed the tasting room doors behind her. Lena continued. Court filings, strategy memos, internal risk assessment drafts, all things Jason's been hinting at in interviews or legal responses. He shouldn't know any of it. Could be coincidence, Claire said, though she didn't believe it. Lena shook her head. Too specific. He knew we were considering a motion to freeze his assets. He mentioned it during a call with opposing counsel. They were amused. Claire's voice was low. How many people have access? Including me? 4. She paused. I've already started checking. That afternoon, Lena ran a quiet audit. No flags in email logs, no external breaches, but a pattern emerged. PDFs opened during off hours, files accessed remotely. All traced back to the same login, Z.McIntyre, Zachary McIntyre, junior paralegal, hired 6 months ago. Nice suits, too eager. Always first to refill the coffee pot and last to leave a meeting, but somehow never remembered a single action item. By Thursday, Lena had hard proof. Bank transfer logs, phone records. One meeting between Zach and a consultant who turned out to be Jason's Shell LLC partner. Claire didn't call for security. She handled it herself. She walked into the small corner office where Zach sat pretending to review a client file. He looked up, eyes wide, just a beat too slow to feign surprise. You stole from me, she said. Quiet, final. Zach stood, stammered something about misunderstandings and pressure from outside parties. Claire cut him off. You weren't pressured. You were bought? Lena entered behind her, a folder in hand. We've already submitted our internal report to the Bar Association. Your name's on it. Zach didn't argue, just turned pale, picked up his coat, and walked out of the office like someone leaving a funeral they caused. But the damage was done. Jason now had her legal playbook. Timelines, negotiation positions, fallback clause. Claire spent that night in her office, rewriting everything with Lena from scratch. Every motion, every backup strategy, every counterfiling. The silence between them was surgical. We're not reacting anymore, Claire said finally, breaking the quiet. Lena nodded. Then what's the new approach? Claire leaned forward, flipping through Elijah's estate binder. We stopped playing defense. The next morning, the unexpected happened. A call from a number she didn't recognize. San Francisco area code, Claire answered, curt. Halloway. The voice was older, steady, formal. Miss Halloway, this is Leonard Price. I was Mr. Carr's private financial manager for the last 11 years, Claire straightened. Elijah? Yes. I've been following the situation from a distance. Out of respect. I didn't want to get involved. Until now. Claire said nothing. I believe I have something you need to see. An hour later, Leonard Price stood in her office, hands folded over a sleek leather portfolio. Elijah gave me this 3 months before he passed, told me to release it only if his estate became contested. He placed the folder on her desk. Claire opened it. Inside was a notarized will, not the revised version already in court. A third will. This one was dated just 5 weeks before Elijah died. Official seal. Signed. Witness. Claire scanned the text. It was brief, cleaner, sharper, purposefully stripped of sentiment. I leave full and exclusive ownership of all business and land assets to my niece, Claire Halloway. My nephew, Jason Halloway, shall receive no share or authority over my estate, financial or otherwise. Claire looked up, stunned. He never told me. Price nodded slowly. He said you'd know what to do when the time came. Claire exhaled, slow, disbelieving. And then the tremor in her hand turned to steel. Is it legally protected? Notarized. Witnessed. Filed with my office. Undisputed chain of custody. Claire closed the folder with deliberate calm. Outside, rain began to fall softly on the vineyard glass. Inside, a war turned. Leonard Price remained standing as Claire held the new will in her hands like something sacred and radioactive at once. I wasn't instructed to stop there, he said softly. From inside his leather briefcase he retrieved a smaller envelope, aged cream paper, sealed in wax, her name written across it in Elijah's unmistakable scrawl. Claire took it. Her fingers were steady, but something inside her had already begun to crack. I was told to deliver this personally, Price continued, and only if Jason challenged your inheritance. Claire stared at the envelope, running her thumb over the wax. The seal was stamped with Elijah's signet ring, a family relic he'd once promised to bequeath to whichever of you doesn't sell their soul first. She broke the seal. Inside was a folded piece of stationery, ink slightly smudged in places, the edges softened by time. Claire, if you're reading this, it means the worst has happened. Jason came back for what wasn't his. I tried. God knows I tried to believe in him, to find something left to rebuild. But you saw him clearly before I did. This vineyard, this legacy. I watched you work for it with blood under your fingernails and blistered hands you never complained about. You never asked me for a thing. And that's exactly why you earned everything. Jason? He turned inheritance into a weapon. He chose manipulation over making something of his own. Don't let him guilt you. Don't let him gaslight you. You owe him nothing but the truth. Protect what you built. Claire finished reading, then folded the letter slowly like tucking away a wound. Lena stepped in quietly. Everything okay? Claire's voice was low. He knew. Elijah knew exactly who Jason was. Her eyes shone just briefly, before she blinked the water back. No collapse, no dramatics, just one breath that cracked, then rebuilt itself. I want this authenticated, she said. The letter. Signature analysis, ink age, paper type. I want it to hold up in court like it came from the Constitution itself. Already have a contact, Lena said. I'll have it in a lab by this afternoon. Claire nodded, sliding the letter back into the envelope like she was resheathing a knife. By the next morning, Jason retaliated. He filed a second restraining order, this time claiming Claire had engaged in an escalating pattern of verbal threats, property invasion, and psychological harassment. The filing listed public confrontation, alleged sabotage, and false claims about forged documents. It was a desperate reach, and Claire knew it. But she also knew public optics were fragile. The last thing she needed was a court appearance that looked like equal footing. Lena handled it. That afternoon, in a tense emergency hearing in Marin County, Judge Melissa Crane reviewed the order from behind horn-rimmed glasses and a deeply unimpressed expression. Jason sat flanked by 2 attorneys, neither of whom looked entirely convinced by their own paperwork. Lena stood on Claire's behalf, armed with timelines, evidence of forged wills, and a forensic analysis of the letter in progress. Judge Crane tapped her pen once, then leaned back. Mr. Halloway, If I had $1 for every inheritance dispute dressed up as victimhood, I'd own my own vineyard. Petition denied. Jason didn't speak. He didn't look at Claire either, just stared at the wood grain of the courtroom table as the judge signed the dismissal order. Afterward, as the attorneys packed their files, Lena handed Claire a sealed folder. Authenticated. Confirmed within 98% certainty. Signature matches previous verified letters from Elijah. The ink? From the same pen brand he used for years. Paper? Custom batch his office stocked. And the date matches postal metadata from Price's delivery logs. Claire opened the folder, skimmed the report, and nodded once. It was official. She now held the letter Jason would never get to read. Back at the vineyard, the sky had turned a deep, cold blue. Storm clouds stacked like threats over the hills, and the vines trembled in the rising wind. Claire stood on her office balcony, the authenticated letter resting in her lap. She didn't feel relief. She felt focus, and she knew Jason wasn't done yet. The next strike wouldn't come from the front. It would come buried, disguised, measured, dangerous, and she'd be ready. The courtroom in Marin County smelled faintly of wood polish and rain. A storm had rolled in overnight, soaking the parking lot outside. Inside, the air was dry and electric. Claire sat at the plaintiff's table, spine straight, expression still. Lena sat beside her, flipping through neatly tabbed exhibits. Across the aisle, Jason adjusted his tie for the third time in 10 minutes. He wore a charcoal suit, probably new, but his face betrayed strain. He was pale, drawn, not broken, but cracking. Judge Melissa Crane entered precisely at 9 a.m. No one rose until she told them to. She didn't smile. She didn't speak unnecessarily. Civil Trial 2579 H. Halloway vs. Halloway. Contest of will and ownership of estate assets. We will begin with opening arguments. Jason's lead counsel, Bradley Shore, a slick-talking estate litigator from L.A., stood and adjusted his cufflinks like this was a film premiere. Your Honor, he began, pacing slowly. This case is not about greed. It's about grief. A brother and sister, once close, torn apart by legacy, by assumptions. Mr. Halloway is not contesting his uncle's wishes. He is seeking clarity in a process that has excluded him at every turn. Claire didn't blink. She'd rehearsed for this moment more than she had for any harvest gala, any investor pitch, any interview. Lena stood calmly when it was her turn. This case is not about legacy. It's about forgery. It's about manipulation. It's about a man who disappeared from his family for 18 years and returned only when the ink on his uncle's death certificate was barely dry. What Elijah Carr left behind was not just a business, it was a judgment. And that judgment was crystal clear. Judge Crane nodded slightly, then gestured toward the first witness, Leonard Price. He took the stand in a slate-gray suit and wire-rimmed glasses, every inch the consummate financial professional. Lena led the question. Elijah Carr entrusted you with private financial documents? Yes. And did he deliver to you a third will, not previously filed with the county? Yes. Dated 5 weeks before his passing. Did that will exclude Jason Halloway from any inheritance? Yes. Entirely. Do you know why? Leonard hesitated, then nodded. Because Mr. Carr told me, verbatim, that Jason had turned inheritance into a currency for power. Jason shifted in his seat. Bradley objected. Hearsay. Judge Crane overruled with a single look. This is probate, Mr. Sure. Let's not pretend we're in criminal court. Claire allowed herself the smallest exhale, but Jason was just warming up. When the time came for cross-examination, he took the stand himself, clearly against his attorney's advice. His voice wavered at first, then found its footing, and then took flight. I loved Elijah, he said, looking right at the jury. We had our disagreements, sure, but I never stopped respecting him. I never imagined he'd cut me out completely. That's not the man I knew. He paused for dramatic effect. And Claire? She didn't invite me into this. She walled me out, kept me from Elijah during his final days, didn't return my calls. She filed that will before his body was cold. And now she wants to rewrite family history as if I never existed. Claire's jaw tightened, but she didn't move. Then came Lena's rebuttal. Mr. Halloway, are you familiar with the Arizona case file titled Halloran vs. State? Jason froze. A beat. Then. That case was sealed. Lena's voice didn't flinch. But it exists. Bradley shot to his feet. Irrelevant. That case has nothing to do with this estate. Your Honor, Lena continued, addressing the bench. We have reason to believe Mr. Halloway used a fraudulent LLC to siphon investor funds under a different name. The timeline aligns with the alleged forging of Mr. Carr's second will. The pattern, Your Honor, is not coincident. It's character. Jason's face drained. Judge Crane held up a hand. I'll allow limited reference to the Arizona matter, pending in-camera review. Continue. The damage had already been done. Jason's credibility wasn't just bruised, it was bleeding out in real time. He glanced toward the jury, then at Claire, his face no longer defiant, but searching, like he might still find some sympathy there. He didn't. Judge Crane tapped her gavel lightly. We'll resume with further witness testimony tomorrow. As the room began to empty, Jason leaned across the aisle just loud enough for Claire to hear. You think this is over? Claire stood without looking at him. No, she said. But you just stepped into a fight you can't finesse. And then she walked out, leaving him surrounded by the silence he used to fill with lies. The second day of trial began with the kind of overcast hush that made the courthouse feel colder than it was. Rain streaked the high windows. The jury filed in slowly, eyes sharper than the day before. Claire sat motionless as Lena called their next witness, Dr. Emery Talbot, forensic document examiner. He was a quiet man with a crisp posture and a voice that carried not through volume, but precision. He was holding Jason's submitted will in a plastic evidence sleeve. Dr. Talbot, Lena began, did you examine this document for authenticity? I did. Can you summarize your findings? Talbot adjusted his glasses. The will is a forgery. Multiple indicators, lifted signature overlays, mismatched ink viscosity, and a notary seal traced from a publicly available document image, not an original stamp. It's a composite, constructed, not written. Jason's attorney objected, but it didn't matter. The jury was already leaning forward. Judge Crane allowed it with a single, tired wave. And in your professional opinion? Lena asked. Was there intent to deceive? Yes, Talbot said, without pause. This wasn't a mistake. It was engineered to pass scrutiny. Poorly, Claire didn't look at Jason, but she could feel him, still, coiled. Lena nodded, then turned toward Claire. Your Honor, the plaintiff would like to enter one final exhibit for the court's review. Judge Crane motioned her forward. Claire stood. She walked slowly to the witness stand with a single sheet of paper in hand, the authenticated letter from Elijah. The courtroom felt like it had stopped breathing. This is a letter written to me by my uncle, Elijah Carr, Claire said. It was delivered posthumously by his banker, Leonard Price. It is signed, sealed, and verified by 2 independent forensic labs. It is not legally binding. It is not a will. It is simply truth. She began to read. Claire, if you're reading this, it means the worst has happened. Jason came back for what wasn't his. Her voice was calm, unrushed, not a performance, but a reckoning. The letter's language echoed through the courtroom like it was a confession meant for every ear in the room. When she finished, she folded the page and returned to her seat. Silence, no cross-examination, no motion, just stillness, until Jason snapped. He stood abruptly. You think that letter means anything? He was senile. He was paranoid. He didn't know what he wanted. Judge Crane raised an eyebrow. Mr. Halloway? Jason kept going. That letter doesn't prove anything. She kept him from me. She poisoned him against me. Mr. Halloway, you are dangerously close to contempt. Jason slammed a hand on the table. You all think she's a saint? She didn't even know. He stopped, chest heaving. Claire narrowed her eyes. Didn't know what? Jason looked at her now, shaking. You want the whole truth, Claire? Elijah wasn't the only thing you inherited. You think I came back for just the vineyard? Judge Crane banged her gavel once. Mr. Halloway, this is not your monologue. Jason's attorney leaned in, whispering frantically. But Jason didn't sit. He looked straight at Claire, voice dark and cracking. The Mendocino cabin? That was never the full story. Elijah co-owned another property, registered under the family trust. Northern Sonoma, river frontage. You never knew about it because I sold it. Quietly. 7 years ago, Claire froze. The air left the room. Lena looked at her. Claire. But Claire didn't hear her. Jason's voice dropped. Ask the county clerk. Look up the sale. Elijah's name was on the deed, but he never checked. And you? You were too busy building your empire to even see what was stolen from you. Judge Crane rose to her feet. Court is adjourned for recess. And Mr. Holloway, one more word without permission and I will hold you in permanently. Jason finally sat. Claire remained frozen in her chair, eyes locked forward, jaw clenched so hard it ached. She didn't look at Jason, not once, but inside her chest, a fire had reignited. This wasn't about money. This wasn't about legacy. This was personal theft. One final lie that went deeper than she'd ever imagined. The minute recess was called, Claire didn't speak. She just walked, past the benches, past Lena, past the echoing click of the gavel, until she hit the cold corridor outside the courtroom. Then she stopped, palms flat against the wall, heart pounding like war drums. Jason had sold something that wasn't his, something of hers. Lena caught up seconds later. We're checking deed record. If he moved it under the trust, there'll be a paper trail. Claire didn't look at her. 7 years. He sold it 7 years ago. Lena nodded. We'll find it. We'll bury him with it. Back at the vineyard that evening, Lena made calls. She worked the county clerks in Sonoma and Mendocino like a surgeon with a scalpel. Charming, relentless, precise. Claire didn't leave her office. She didn't need to. She sat still, staring at the framed blueprint of the cabin Elijah had once drawn on a napkin, a place they were going to restore together. A quiet space above the river, left untouched for decades. A week later, the documents arrived. Lena laid them out across the long oak conference table like evidence in a crime scene. The original deed showed Elijah Carr and Claire Holloway as co-owners of the Sonoma riverfront property, transferred to the family trust in 2009. Then, 7 years ago, a sale. Jason Holloway, signing as acting trustee. Falsified documentation. Claire's signature forged and backdated. Property sold to a Shell LLC based out of Nevada. The buyer traced back to one of Jason's dummy companies, Lena said. Same umbrella he used in the Arizona fraud case. Different name. Same tactic. Claire didn't flinch. She looked over the signature. It was wrong. Too clean. Too symmetrical. She remembered where she was that year. She remembered every deal, every contract. And she'd never signed a sale of that cabin. He buried this, she said softly. Until he couldn't anymore, Lena added. Claire filed criminal fraud charges the next morning. The motion was swift, backed by the original deed, trust document, and a handwriting analysis confirming the forgery. Within 72 hours, the DA's office froze Jason's remaining accounts pending investigation, and just like that, the tide turned. News spread faster than any interview Jason had ever given. Jason Holloway accused of selling co-owned family property in secret fraud scheme. New twist in Holloway inheritance trial. Vineyard brother faces criminal investigation. A feature ran in the San Francisco Chronicle, quoting a source close to the case. This wasn't just a family dispute. This was long-game theft disguised as kinship. By Friday, Claire received a call from the board of one of her vineyard's largest private investors. We're with you, the voice said. Public perception be damned. He just gave you the win. Even staff who had gone quiet now returned with steadier hands. Orders resumed. Contracts reinstated. The rot Jason had seeded was drying up in the sun, but Claire wasn't celebrating. Not yet. She stood on the vineyard's north ridge that evening, the wind colder than it should have been, watching the shadows lengthen along the vines. Her peace hadn't returned. Not fully. Lena joined her quietly. He's unraveling, she said. 2 firms dropped him. His attorney requested a recess for restructuring counsel. He's losing footing. Claire nodded. He's not done. Lena tilted her head. You think he has more? Claire's voice was steel. I know he does. People like Jason don't torch everything just to walk away. They scorch the earth hoping something will crawl back to them. Lena hesitated. The criminal trial will take time, but this puts us ahead in probate. You've practically won. Claire didn't respond right away. Then softly, he sold our past for silence, and now he's screaming because he lost control. A text buzzed on Lena's phone. She checked it, then frowned. Claire noticed. What? It's from the Mendocino registrar. You're going to want to see this. She handed the phone over. Claire read it. Then again. Slower. Another property. Different name. Same trust. Sold. Claire stared at the hills stretching ahead. Vines laid like nerves across the earth, and knew with absolute clarity Jason's theft ran deeper than inheritance. This was a legacy built on lies, The meeting was Claire's idea. She wanted no cameras, no counsel, no Lena, no statements, subpoenas, or press releases, just a final conversation. She chose the vineyard's private cellar, cool, quiet, lit only by Edison bulbs strung low across the stone ceiling. The air smelled of oak barrels and dust, and the kind of silence that could cut clean if you let it. Jason arrived 10 minutes late. He looked different now, thinner, eyes ringed in red, suit wrinkled, shirt untucked at the waist. The mask of composure had finally slipped, and underneath it was a man who had run out of cards and run out of charm. Claire sat at the tasting table with 2 glasses already poured, a vintage red, 2015 Syrah, the year she almost sold the vineyard to save it. She didn't look up when he entered. "Sit," she said. Jason obeyed. He stared at the wine but didn't touch it. "Why am I here?" he asked, voice hoarse. Claire kept her hands folded. "To speak plainly. One time. No court reporters, no theatrics." Jason leaned forward, elbows on the table. "You've already buried me, Claire. Is this about victory? You want to watch me beg?" She tilted her head. "Not really." He scoffed. Then, more quietly, "I never meant for it to get this far." Claire arched a brow. Jason's voice cracked at the edge. "I was drowning. After Arizona, everything collapsed. I owed people. Real people. Dangerous one. The inheritance. It felt like the only way out." She said nothing. "I didn't come back for revenge," he continued. "I came back to survive." Claire finally looked at him. "You chose survival over integrity. I chose survival through work." He shifted uncomfortably. "You had help? Elijah." "I earned Elijah," she snapped. "One vine at a time, while you vanished and cashed out on land I hadn't even grieved yet." Jason rubbed his face. I needed the money, Claire." "So did I," she replied, her voice ice. "Difference is, I earned it." The words hung between them like the last breath of a dying storm. Jason reached for the glass, then hesitated. "You want a deal?" Claire said flatly. "That's why you asked for this." He didn't deny it. "I sign away my claims. You drop the fraud charges. We let this die in silence." Claire picked up her glass. She stared at the crimson swirl, the dark legs of history sliding down the bowl. Then she raised it slowly, deliberately. "To silence," she said, raising it toward him. Jason blinked, unsure if it was a truce. Claire drank, then stood. "You sold our family's bones for bail money, and now you're standing in a room built on what's left of their memory, asking for mercy." Jason stood too, desperate now. "Claire, please. There's still time." "There's not," she cut in. She turned to leave, then paused. "Sign whatever papers Lena sends you. Or don't. I don't need your surrender to win." Jason reached for her again, not physically, but with a final plea. "I'm still your brother." Claire turned back, eyes colder than the cellar air. "No, you're a man I used to know, standing in the ruins of what he thought he could steal." She left him, standing there, alone, the untouched glass still full, the cellar quiet. Outside, dusk had settled like smoke over the hills. Claire walked slowly up the gravel path toward the main house, her heels crunching the ground in a rhythm that sounded like an ending. A security guard nodded as she passed. A truck pulled into the lower lot, contractors arriving early for tomorrow's harvest tour prep. The world was moving again. And Jason? He was fading into its margins. Claire paused at the main doors, her phone buzzing in her coat pocket. Text from Lena. "Judge Crane just moved closing arguments up. She's ready to rule." Claire stared out across the vineyard. The sky was bleeding orange behind the rows, her glass still warm in her hand. She didn't smile. She didn't need to. The courtroom was full, not just with journalists and locals, but with the kind of people who only show up for blood. They packed the benches with hushed anticipation, phones silenced but hearts racing. Court TV was camped out by the steps. A wine blogger live-tweeted from the hallway. Claire arrived just before 9 a.m., dressed in tailored charcoal, hair pinned back. No jewelry, no expression. Lena walked beside her, papers in hand, unshakable. Jason was already seated when Claire entered, alone. His second legal team had thinned. His new attorney, a younger man named Drew Kessler, sat beside him with a laptop open but untouched. Jason looked smaller somehow, still clean-shaven but paler, more withdrawn. He didn't turn when Claire passed behind him. Judge Crane entered without announcement. The room stood, then sat. "We've reached the final phase," she said, adjusting her glasses. "The jury has returned a verdict." The clerk handed her the envelope. She opened it, read in silence, then looked to the jury foreperson, a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and a vineyard badge still clipped to her belt. In the matter of Holloway versus Holloway, the foreperson said, voice unwavering, we find in favor of the plaintiff, Claire Holloway. Claire felt nothing. Not triumph, not vindication, just quiet. Further, the woman continued, we recommend full financial restitution, coverage of all legal fees, and referral of forged documentation to the district attorney's office for criminal investigation. A hush rippled through the room. Jason slumped. Claire didn't move. Judge Crane nodded. So ordered. Miss Holloway is hereby granted full, uncontested ownership of all properties, assets, and interests listed under the Carr Holloway Trust. She paused. Mr. Vi. Holloway. This court refers the matter of forged documentation to the district attorney for formal charges. Your legal representation will be notified of timelines. Jason looked up at that, jaw trembling, eyes suddenly alive with panic. Your Honor, his voice cracked. I intend to appeal. You won't be, came a voice beside him. Jason turned, startled. Drew Kessler, his attorney, was already closing his laptop, calm, detached, like a man switching off a machine he never planned to restart. What the hell are you talking about? Jason hissed. Kessler stood, addressed the judge. Your Honor, I'm filing a motion to withdraw as counsel, effective immediately. After reviewing sealed case details and ethics obligation, I cannot in good faith represent Mr. Holloway in any appeal. Judge Crane didn't flinch. Accepted. Jason stood too fast, knocking over his chair. You can't do this. Kessler didn't respond, just picked up his briefcase and walked out, not sparing Jason another glance. The final twist hadn't come from Claire. It had come from within. The court recessed. Reporters rushed out murmuring about sealed ethics violations, bar complaints, and whisper networks. Claire remained seated, watching Jason slump back into his chair, hands limp at his sides, a shell of entitlement with nowhere left to hide. Later that evening, Claire sat in her office while the media storm raged outside. Every outlet had picked it up. Fraud, family, and fermented lies. The fall of Jason Holloway. Judge rules in favor of Claire Holloway. DA to pursue criminal charges. Even his lawyer walked out. Holloway brother faces legal isolation. But Claire wasn't watching the headlines. She was rereading Elijah's letter. One sentence in particular. Don't let him guilt you. Don't let him gaslight you. You owe him nothing but the truth. There was a knock at her office door. Lena stepped in, holding a thin manila envelope. What is it? Claire asked. Lena looked strangely still. Something he sent. Certified mail. Just arrived. Claire opened the envelope. Inside was a single page. Her name typed at the top. Then a line of text. Typed, but unsigned. I was wrong. I know that now. The appeal is yours forever. I won't touch it again. Below it, attached by a paperclip, was the signed deed to the stolen cabin. Jason's name crossed out. Claire looked at it for a long time, then folded the paper. No tears, no triumph, just something close to relief, and something even closer to finality. 3 weeks after the verdict, Jason disappeared. No public statements, no interview, no social media activity. A bench warrant for failure to appear on the fraud inquiry was quietly issued, then retracted when his new counsel negotiated a continuance. But still, no one saw him. Rumors bloomed. Someone said he left the country. Another claimed he checked into a high-end rehab center in Wyoming. One reporter swore they spotted him boarding a ferry off Bainbridge Island, looking thinner, paler, and suddenly very aware that he was no longer interesting to the public. Claire didn't follow. She didn't need to know where he went. The story had ended the way it was always meant to, not with fanfare, but with absence. At the vineyard, life didn't exactly return to normal. It recalibrated. The winery's fall tour sold out in record time. The expansion into the Western Ridge broke ground. A boutique label Claire had quietly nurtured, Elijah's Row, won regional acclaim for its Syrah, and was now being courted by distributors from Santa Barbara to Seattle. But Claire didn't hold press conferences. She declined panel invitations. When a business columnist emailed asking for comment on rebuilding after betrayal, Lena typed the response herself. We don't rebuild from betrayal. We choose not to live in its ruins. One morning, Claire gathered her team in the courtyard and announced a new initiative. 5% of Elijah's Row proceeds would be donated annually to victims of estate fraud and financial coercion, with an emphasis on women and family-targeted scams. No one asked why. They didn't have to. The press picked it up, ran it alongside quiet coverage of Jason's vanished reputation. The public, once eager for scandal, now barely whispered his name. He hadn't just lost the vineyard. He'd lost the narrative. Claire spent her evenings walking the rows alone. The vines were thinner now, the season changing. Workers wore hoodies and boots instead of linen and hats. The air tasted of frost and ripening wood. One evening, as Lena and Claire reviewed permits in the office, Lena glanced over her glasses. "You could write a book," she said. "I'm serious. The real story, told your way." It'd sell. Claire didn't even look up. "I already wrote the truth." Lena smiled faintly. "Where?" Claire glanced toward the cellar stairs. "Down there. In bottles." They didn't speak of it again. That Sunday, Claire rose before dawn. She dressed simply. Dark jeans, boots, and Elijah's old vineyard jacket, the one that still smelled faintly of pine and smoke, stored in the same closet she'd kept sealed since his death. She drove alone. The cemetery was just east of the vineyard, up a quiet road that wound through redwoods and empty pasture. No markers, no marble angel, just flat stone plates, sunken slightly into the earth like the memory of something once standing tall. She walked to Elijah's grave without hesitation. No umbrella, no flowers, just a bottle. Elijah's Row, 2019 vintage. She placed it at the foot of his name, the label facing outward. For a long moment she just stood there, letting the wind move through her, letting the cold sting without apology. "I kept it," she said finally, voice steady. "All of it. The vineyard, the land, even the parts I didn't know were mine." No one responded. Just the leaves, shifting slightly. Claire exhaled. "I wish you'd told me about the third will, about the other property. I wish you'd let me protect you while you were still here." Her hand grazed the glass of the bottle. "But I understand now. You wanted to see who we'd become." She knelt, placed her palm flat against the headstone. "I hope I became the one you believed I could." She didn't cry. She didn't have to. She rose, turned, and walked back toward the car. The trees whispered overhead. Somewhere far off, a hawk cried once, then vanished into the canopy. Back at the vineyard, her staff had already begun morning prep. Claire stepped out of the car and looked across the hills. The silence she'd fought so hard to earn was here, and it no longer haunted her. It belonged to her. The offer came in a padded envelope, studio letterhead, a cover note written in glossy, familiar Hollywood euphemism, "Your story matters. Let us tell it." Attached, a script treatment, working title, "Blood and Vines." Claire read it once, then again, slower, just to make sure she was reading what she thought she was reading. Jason reduced to a misunderstood tragic figure. Claire reimagined as ruthless but secretly wounded Elijah turned into a sentimental drunk who left behind chaos and Cabernet. She didn't laugh. She didn't tear it up either. She simply slid it back into the envelope and wrote a single line across the flap in red ink. "Some vineyards never sell." Then she mailed it back, postage paid. Instead of a movie deal, Claire built a wine library. A real one. She carved out the north wing of the original estate house and turned it into a 2-room archive, oak-paneled, glass-encased, temperature-controlled. A living history of vintages past, journal entries, photos, letters. She named it the Car Room. At the center, under soft lighting and a small framed black and white photo of Elijah in his youth, sat one bottle of every year's harvest since Claire first took over the estate. No audio tour, no QR codes, just a plaque above the entrance that read, "Built from what we kept, preserved from what we survived." The staff noticed. Their loyalty, once rooted in respect, deepened into something else, into ownership. No one left that year. Even the seasonal hires stayed longer than usual, asking for permanent positions. They didn't work for Claire anymore. They worked with her. One Saturday in early November, the Napa Valley Wine Growers Guild held their annual Founders Ball at a vineyard Claire used to be too intimidated to walk into. This time, she arrived as the guest of honor. She wore black silk and Elijah's old cufflink, reworked into earrings by a local jeweler. She didn't prepare a speech. She didn't need to. When they handed her the Lifetime Legacy and Viticulture Award, Claire simply said, "I kept the land, but the land also kept me." The applause didn't feel like noise. It felt like recognition, earned, not gifted. A week later, Claire drove north alone. The road to Mendocino was narrower than she remembered. Trees pressed closer now. The air was wetter, tinged with wood smoke and sea salt. The cabin had been cleaned but left unchanged. No renovations, no designers, just a fresh coat of sealant on the porch and a new lock on the door. She brought no suitcase, just a book, a wool blanket, and a single bottle of Elijah's Roe. Inside, it smelled of pine and memory. She lit the fireplace, opened the windows wide, and let the cold in. No music, no phone, no company, just the creak of old floorboards and the wind threading through trees like a forgotten lullaby. She poured one glass of wine, sat in the chair by the hearth, and listened. Not for Jason, not for ghosts, not even for Elijah. She listened for herself. For the first time in over a year, she could hear her own thoughts again, unfiltered, unguarded. They weren't loud, but they were hers. She didn't cry. She didn't toast. She just drank the wine slowly, watching the fire ripple against the walls, and allowed the weight of everything she'd fought for to finally settle. Not as a burden, but as belonging. Outside, the redwoods held their ground. Inside, Claire did too. Tomorrow, she'd return to the vineyard. Tonight, she reclaimed the quiet, the kind Jason never understood, the kind you can't fake or forge, the kind you earn. The letter arrived in early spring when the first wild mustard bloomed between the vineyard rows like small bursts of forgiveness. Claire found it in the stack of mail left on her desk. Unmarked envelope, no return address, postmarked from the Olympic Peninsula. The handwriting was unmistakable. Still slanted, still rushed, still Jason. She stared at it for a long time before opening it. Inside was a single page, folded with care. No smudges, no stains, no theatric. Just the last of his words, laid bare in typewritten lines that didn't try to manipulate or defend, only admit. Claire, I was wrong. About Elijah, about the land, about you. I told myself I was owed something, that the family legacy was mine by birth, even if I did nothing to earn it. I thought returning meant reclaiming, but all I ever did was steal. You didn't beat me. I buried myself. Enclosed is the deed. No strings, no conditions. I've signed away all claims, present and future. The estate is yours, fully and permanently. I've sent the paperwork to the DA as well. If there's peace in that, I hope it finds you. J. Claire set the letter down gently, her fingers resting against its edge as though it might vanish if handled too harshly. Attached by a gold paperclip was the final deed to the Mendocino property, fully transferred, signed, and notarized. Jason's name crossed out, legally and symbolically. No loopholes, no back doors. She didn't cry. She didn't smile, either. There was something quieter than either of those emotions blooming beneath her ribs, a kind of release that felt neither victorious nor sad, just necessary. Later that evening, Claire walked out to the porch of the cabin, the same porch Elijah had once said would hold 100 sunsets if you sat still long enough to see them. She brought with her a single glass of wine, Elijah's Roe, 2022 vintage. The harvest had been hard that year. Early frost, late rains, yields down across the valley. But the bottles that survived? Unmistakable, deep, smoky, layered with dark fruit and oak. She poured slowly, letting the wine breathe as the sun lowered behind the redwood. The horizon glowed soft and amber, light filtering through trees like honey. Claire sat in the old wooden chair by the railing, glass in hand, legs tucked beneath her. The air carried the scent of damp earth and pine needles. Somewhere nearby, a branch cracked under a deer's slow step. Nature went on, unaffected. She took a sip, let it sit on her tongue before swallowing. When she finally spoke, it wasn't loud. Family comes first? Her voice was tired but resolute. Only if it acts like one. She let the words fall into the dusk, not needing an answer. The wind shifted slightly. The last of the sunlight slipped below the hills, pulling the shadows with it. Claire looked out over the darkening vineyard land she had fought for, bled for, and held her glass a moment longer. Then, softly but with absolute certainty, she whispered the final words aloud. "And this estate will never be for sale."